Hey, what's going on, everybody? Hope y'all are doing good and you've had a great week, new year, and you guys got those goals and those New Year's resolutions that you guys are going to be going into. Let's hope that you guys can stick with them. The there's so many things that we always talk about of, this new year, new me, new resolutions. I'm actually gonna do it this time, and we always kind of fall short on that, don't we? We don't really stay consistent with it. We don't keep up with what we say we're gonna do. And that's like an idea kind of what I want to talk about today. But hey, has anyone heard that or seen that video of Steve Harvey when he talks about faith? So if you haven't, the short version is, he's on, I think he's on when he's on Family Feud or something. He's talking, he's like, whenever you make a prayer, God hears it, and he wraps it up in a nice little present with a bow and everything, and he sends it off immediately. The problem is he doesn't tell you whenever it's going to get in. So you have to stay on Faith Street. And then you have to wait for just like anything else, UPS, FedEx, any kind of postal service that's going to make the delivery. You have to be there to sign for it. And then you can pick it up and get your delivery, but you don't know when it's coming in. And that's kind of the idea, that he's talking about that the Father brought to my mind this week was on faith, is that faith is by, you know, in Hebrews 11:1-4, as it says, now faith is the certainty of things hoped for, a proof of things not seen. For by it the people of old gained approval. By faith we understand that the world has been created by the word of God, so that what is seen has not been made out of things that are. So it's hoping for something, right? It's wanting something. It's saying, God, I put all this faith and trust I'm putting in you that you're going to give me what I need, because we think we know what we want. We never really do. He knows we want better. So if we're like, I want this thing, and he's like, well, really, I've got this big thing over here. But you have to wait and you have to be patient and all the fun, crazy challenges that God puts us through to show us that lesson, right? If you will. So, anyways, that video with Steve Harvey, I just came across it again earlier this week, and I was like, you know what, that I need to talk about that because that's kind of the season I'm in right now. Just having that faith and hoping in him on a few things. That's the desert he's got me in at the moment is just staying faithful. And it's super hard to say the least. So, I know it just as well as the next person. We all have those seasons, and it's whether we're going to stay on Faith Street. And that just like kind of, stuck with me this week. So that's why I want to talk about it. So moving on into just after that in Elite and Hebrews 11:6, it says, "And without faith it is impossible to please him, for the one who comes to God must believe that he exists and that he proves to be one who rewards those who seek him." So again, it's just that idea that, we have to keep that faith and go, okay, it's not happening on my timing the way I want or any of that stuff. It's, his timing, when, where, how, what lessons do we need to learn in this season, which really suck because he doesn't just like give us that that list. And he's not like, all right, here's the things you need to learn. Here's the things you need to work on. It's you're gonna figure it out along the way. And if you don't, then you're just gonna stay in the season. And that really sucks. So yeah, I hate those just as much as the next. So, anyways, and then I'm just sticking in Hebrews really, Hebrews 11 this entire time, for the most part. So then moving on to Hebrews 11:32-34. And what more shall I say? For time will fail me if I tell of Gideon, Barak, Samson, Jephthah, I don't know how to pronounce that, of David and Samuel and the prophets, by whose faith conquered kingdoms, performed acts of righteousness, obtained promises, shut the mouths of lions, quenched the power of fire, escaped the edge of the sword, from weakness, were made strong, became mighty in war, put foreign armies um, to flight. My bad. And so it's like, hey, here's all these. It's like, hey, let's talk about faith when these guys had faith, and these are, not everyone had different types of faith, but here's like some of these guys who, like David, he had faith and he went into the lion's den and he trusted and hoped and had faith that God would save him from it. He didn't know how. He's just like, all right, I trust you. And what did he do? He went and he closed the mouth of the lions. And so it's having that kind of faith. And so there's like good things that can come from it. But then we just jump forward a little bit into 11:36 through 37, and it says, "And others experienced mocking and flogging, and further chains and imprisonment. They were stoned, they were sawn in two, they were tempted, they were put to death by the sword. They went about in sheepskins and goatskins, being destitute, afflicted, tormented." So it's saying that even though, this righteousness, this faith got them and they came on the other side, that, God brought them through. It's not saying that they just were able to glide through that. They still suffered so much. Paul, talks about all the times. I think it was just reading it in Second Corinthians, how he was like beaten, and in prison, and he was in prison and he was beaten in there, and all the things that happened, that the guys, the people had to suffer. These guys suffered so much, obviously not to say what Jesus didn't already do, because he suffered, quite a few things his entire life, especially in the end for us. And so he still had to suffer, and he still had hope and faith in what God was going to bring about. Didn't know how, when, where, and why, but just knew that. So I just been reading that, and it stood out to me, and I was like, all right, just because we know God, just because we're faithful, just because we're doing the right thing, that's been part of my season. I'm like, I've been doing all these things right. At least I thought so. At least I think so. What's wrong? And it's like, you know, probably nothing is wrong, but he's just testing your faith on when these hard things come about and you think you're doing right or you are doing right. What are you going to do when that happens? And then it goes back to Job, like anything else. Righteous man, didn't do anything wrong, suffered immensely for a while, didn't know why, but continued to praise God, and then came about and he got, like tenfold or something like that, whether it was two or tenfold, he got back and everything he lost. So it was just those kinds of thoughts and memories, and having to read those scriptures and be like, okay, so that's just this type of season. That still sucks though. So, anyways, that's just kind of what has been standing out to me recently. And then finished up with in Hebrews with verse 39. And all these, having gained approval through their faith, did not receive what was promised, because God provided something better for us, so that apart from us, they would not be made perfect. So, and it was just going into some people didn't get to see stuff, like Moses didn't get to see the promised land, right? He was promised it. He did everything, he was doing awesome work. He didn't get to see it. So sometimes we see things, sometimes we don't. Sometimes it just comes in a different way. And that's that, it's still rough because we just don't know how it's going to come about. And that's one of my things as being an overthinker, and always thinking 10 steps ahead, and just always so far in tomorrow. I'm not here in today. So that's one of the things he's got me working on, is being present, letting go of the all that stuff. But it was actually just as I was looking over this earlier, the parable in Matthew 13, verses 18 to 23 came about, and it's the parable of the seed. And it just kind of clicked for me, for faith, consistency, and just, sticking with it. So, in the parable of the seed, it talks about how, the seed, it falls on rocky places, and immediately it says immediately receives it with joy, yet it has no firm root in himself, but is only tempted, and when affliction or persecution occur because of the word, immediately he falls away. And that's just like anything else in today's world. Everyone's got these, and new year, new me. I'm gonna go to the gym. I'm gonna do all these things. I'm gonna lose that 20, 30, 50 pounds. I'm gonna start reading that book a month. I'm gonna start whatever the thing is. I'm going to start doing this positive, good, right thing. And they're going to put so much effort into it in the beginning. And they're going to do that for a few days, maybe a few weeks. But then they're going to burn out because, like, oh my God, I'm doing so much right now, but I don't see anything. And and that's how life is. You have to be consistent with it. And there's no timetable on consistency. Those people who are like fitness influencers, and they're like, hey, rock hard abs in 30 days, no matter where you're at in your fitness journey. It's like, well, that's a lie. That's not how things work. Some people might be further along and they could get it in 30 days. Some people could be more further along and get it in 2 weeks. Some people could be really far behind and they won't see that for a year. Everyone's on a different path. So, so that parable of the seeds came up, and then obviously the next part of, the seeds that grew up in thorns, they ended up being they were good, they get started growing, and then they hear the word of the Lord. They're like, okay, this is something interesting. But then the anxiety of the world and the deceitfulness of wealth choke the word, and uh, and then becomes unfruitful. So, staying in those lies of the world, or just focusing on what's not actually real. It's like, hey, I want this, and it's only this way. And then that's how we kind of get lost in this, what is it that God can and will provide? Because we think this, I've been sitting here thinking this is like, it's this, it only looks like this, but he's like, no, it's something over here and it looks completely different. It's so much better than anything you could have even imagined. And that's just constant. He's still just showing me more of the versions of that. And that's what it seems like how so many of us will live in our everyday lives, is thinking we know best, and giving it that is giving that control and that power and et cetera, giving that back to the Father because it's his anyways. And so that's it's just those interesting things that, just this parable jumped out at me, and it felt like it fit pretty well with this faith and consistency. And in fact, that's like the whole new year. So that whole new year, new me thing. I was like, okay, God, I can see that, throwing it all together. And then of course, the good seed that falls on good soil, and it grows its roots. One of those really sucky things that you don't see the fruit growing above the ground because the roots have to grow really deep. So that, yeah, it sucks no matter which way you look at it, because you just don't know what's happening, and you don't know if it's a punishment uh, or if it's just him pruning you and all these, or just planting those seeds. And that takes time. Some seeds can sprout up in a matter of days. Some take years. Like what was it? There's a certain type of what's it called? Bamboo. There's a certain type of bamboo, and it took like 6 years to, like, it would sprout like maybe a couple inches above the ground, but it was creating such a ginormous root structure that it took like I'm just throwing out numbers at the moment because I can't remember, but it was like 6 years to grow this ginormous root structure, and it grew this much um uh over the that you could see over the dirt. And then within like 6 weeks, it sprouted from like 2 inches to like, I don't know, 20 feet or something like that high. And because now it had such a solid root structure, now it could just do what it needed to do. So it's remembering and hearing those types of analogies. I'm like, okay, that's an actual thing. So how is God doing that in this area of my life? Blah, 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 blah. So those are just things that were helpful for me. But good seed falling on good soil, let it grow its roots, let the fruit come about, trust in God, and and then it grows sometimes 100, sometimes 60, sometimes 30 as much. And that's Matthew 13, 18 to 23. And then the last one was Isaiah 40, 31. Worship while it pretty much just means like worship while you wait, which again, like anything else, is hard because I'm so used to being the one to do stuff. And I'm like, okay, let me get that done. Okay, I got to put in this work. Okay, I got to blah, 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 blah. And he's teaching me that of the many things, there's quite a few, but of the many things, it's let me do it. Chill out. Stop thinking so far ahead. So that's just kind of like what's been on, that was on kind of my mind today. And what I saw uh, for this week was just being faithful, staying on Faith Street. And what is faith and hope? It's literally just consistency. So if we can be consistent, if we can learn consistency and understand the fact that, I've been on my fitness journey for, I think I'm in my 8th year now, or coming up on my 8th year. And when I look at the first couple of years, I'm like, oh man, I didn't do any of this stuff. I didn't, I don't think I did legs for the first 3 years because I was like, oh, that sucks. I don't like them, so I'm not going to do them. Then I learned more information. I'm like, okay, I need to do them. Then it wasn't until year 5 or 6 that I came across the concept of, yeah, you actually need to be eating more. You need to work on your nutrition and your health. And it's like, okay, well, now I'm starting that. So I've been in the gym and I've been doing stuff, but I didn't realize that I needed an X amount of protein. I didn't realize that I needed this much sleep, this much water. I didn't know anything about creatine. I didn't know anything about X, Y, Z. So there's so many things that we learn as we go, even though we've been doing it for days, weeks, months, years, being around that environment, going to church, talking with God, reading the Bible, whatever the case is. We keep thinking that we're doing stuff and we're doing good, and you normally probably are, but there's so much more to learn, and we just don't you don't know what you don't know. So that's just one of those interesting things that, again, just comes about. I don't know something until I know it. And that's stuff that God reveals whenever He is wanting and willing to reveal that because of His whole process. He knows a little bit more than I do. So, anyways, it's just that kind of stuff of stay consistent, consistency, faithfulness, hope. It's all pretty much saying the same thing that when you're not where you want to be, one, make sure you're doing what you're doing. Are you doing what the word says, and are you being faithful and honest and loving your neighbors yourself, and et cetera, et cetera. Are you doing those kinds of things? If so, great. Are you just being pruned? Are you being planted? Are you being watered? Are you just waiting? What is it? And same, and again, it makes so much more sense looking at it in that sense when I can look at it in the fact that I spent years in the gym and I didn't know anything about this and I didn't know anything about that. And then I learned more about X thing. And I'm like, okay, now I was like, wow, I've been in the gym for 4 or 5 years and I'm just learning about nutrition. Like I've heard about it, but I didn't know how to implement that to my own routine and lifestyle. And so I had to start changing more new things until it became my new norm. So, anyways, I think I got the message across. So, anyways, hope that was able to help someone else out. If not, it's just a reminder for me to say the least. Love you guys. Have a blessed one.